Yeah, well, I would say that, of course, I totally agree with my friend Arnaud about this negative evolution, in fact, the degeneration of the European structures. We can see that this is deeper and deeper division between the interests of the financial and political elites of the European Union acting towards creation of the European superstate, and of the interest of the ordinary people living, especially in the states of the European Union, but also the ones related strongly to the European Union, yeah, for example, the United Kingdom. When we reach the past, we can see that the background for the creating a new way of European cooperation was to avoid conflict, especially military conflict. So it was strongly linked to the experience of the World War and to the all this destruction of the continent. It was also, and it is hardly remember now, it was also reaction, especially of the this time French government reaction to American domination of Europe, and especially in the times of the President de Gaulle. It was visible in his personal relations with German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, and well, in his de Gaulle resistance against joining the European structures by the United Kingdom, which was then seen as the closest ally, strategic allies, and even agent of influence of the United States in Europe. So, but another element, apart from these geopolitical ones, was strongly related to the common values, to this strong historical base and tradition of deep humanitarian, Christian also values, which created Europe for 100 years, despite, of course, of the negative aspects of the Western civilization. We all know them as a colonial approach, as slavery, as development of neoliberal capitalism. Apart from that, this element of humanism was still existing within European identity. Of course, we all know that the present European Union is something completely different, even opposite to this European tradition. As Arnaud mentioned, it's some kind of the globalist experiment in miniature. So it was a kind of it was attempt to create not only some pre-world government, so some kind of experiment before creating the real world government, but it was also attempt to create some kind of completely new identity based on unrooted people coming all over the world, coming to Europe as immigrants, with, well, shifting down all the best interests and traditions which have been shared by the people living in Europe for centuries. And this experiment has failed, in fact. So this neo-European identity, which was created by the bureaucrats and financiers of Brussels, this part of the global financial markets which acted through Europe, was completely unattractive for the migrants coming to Europe. They preferred to keep or to return to their own traditional values, whatever coming from the West India, Africa, or wider Muslim countries. And it was, of course, extremely oppressing toward the people, to the natives of the European states. This neoliberal agenda, Arnaud already mentioned about including all these elements of moral progressivism, of transgender, of the creating some kind of the cult of the climate transformation, climate transition, energy transition as well. All these elements, it was completely strange to the people living here, but oppressed by new political form of the neoliberal government in Europe. We are facing decline of what we know, what we knew for decades as liberal democracy in the West, especially in Europe. We are facing something which could be called neoliberal authoritarian regime in Europe, with their own doctrine, with own attempts to create a new identity, and of course with elements of own geopolitics. So when we know exactly, for example, that it was European politics who have been present in the very beginning, in the very early stage of the Ukrainian crisis, so we cannot be surprised that this European attitude towards an attempt of ending this war is completely different than, for example, could be presented by not only Russians, of course, but also by Chinese, by Indian, by non-European powers, including a significant part of the American political elite under the presidency of Donald Trump. Europe is kind of neoliberal globalist experiment which has failed, but which is still fighting, especially for profits and for money and financial influence over what is left from Europe. Yeah, well, I believe that it's really important to first understand what this war is fighting for now. And of course, this position is completely different from different sides. We know exactly what is Volodymyr Zelensky fighting for. He is fighting for more golden toilet seats, and of course for his own and his family and co-workers' personal security. And that's secured already by all these properties and bank accounts he had all over the world. Yeah? So that's absolutely obvious. He wants this war to continue to secure more time to get more golden toilets. That's obvious. From the Russian side, that is absolutely clear and transparent from the very beginning, because this operation started with very clear statement of the Russian side what they're fighting for. They're fighting against the neo-Nazis attitude of the Kiev regime, and they fight for the rights of the Russian-speaking people in the east of the Ukrainian state. And of course, they fight for their own Russian security, which was at risk because of closing NATO influence hundreds of miles closer to Moscow. That was very clearly and directly stated by President Vladimir Putin. But the point is, what is the purpose of European and American involvement in this conflict now? And I believe that it's absolutely crucial to see that for now, the main contradictory point between Europe and the USA is not about land, not about territories in Ukraine. It's about Russian assets. Russian assets, which have been already frozen in the Western banks and funds in the especially also in Europe, in Brussels, for example. And that's the very crucial and sensitive moment for European diplomacy and economy to deal with, because we know from these 28 points of President Trump that President Trump said, okay, USA needs at least some of the money they invested in this war back for the American taxpayers. And the way to do it is first to secure a significant American share of this frozen Russian asset, and of course to get some gains from after-war rebuild, reconstruction of Ukraine. And that's something which is, of course, element of contradiction, element of argue with so-called coalition of willing. So especially with the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, because they want their own share. They say, okay, about 200 billion euros of these frozen Russian assets are already in Brussels, in Euroclear funds. So we are to deal with this money. We are to take our bigger share of this. If not, we will support Kiev enough to continue this war. Because we have to be aware that, of course, with the time, as Steve mentioned, when this war continues, of course, Ukraine continue to lose it. So Kiev regime lost control over more and more territories. That would be probably soon Kherson, Zaporozhye, Dnipro, and finally Odessa. That would be something which is absolutely, we cannot see that different. That absolutely must happen, of course, with time. Of course, it will be a lot of Ukrainian victims, a lot of destruction. It is always related to war. But this amount of the Russian assets frozen in the West is constant. That will be all the time. That will be the same money to be divided by the superpowers. So, of course, Europe is Piper Tiger. Arnaud is absolutely right. That's a Piper Tiger. That's a fake superpower. And they know exactly that they cannot keep this war going indefinitely. This is impossible for Europe to send own troops in line to fight together with the Ukrainian ones. A couple of months ago, when we discussed about the very first attempts to create this corps of Europe, European Corps of Peace to be sent to Ukraine, we mentioned that in fact all these European military and political superpowers are able to create not more than about 20 to 30,000 people to be sent there. So it's absolutely ridiculous when you compare that to the size of the Russian army as well to the present Ukrainian one. But they still. So they are not economical power, they are not military power, and they are absolutely not in political power to keep this war going forever. But they still can support Zelensky long enough to get the bigger share of this Russian asset in the future. Of course, it's a question of this American chicken play. Who turn away first one. That's the point. And the real tragedy will be with no one. Turn back, and then we have the crash. And of course, the crash at the cost of Ukraine, the cost of the especially European, Eastern European nations who are to be next involved in this conflict. But still, this is now conflict and war only for assets and for money. And for many reasons, it was this platform, this element of analysis of this conflict, which was present on the very beginning. Of course, NATO wanted to shift its borders to be closer to Moscow. But in fact, it was the great invasion to the assets and to the possibility to exploit the Ukraine, but also to steal money of the Russian banks and of the Russian budget located in the Western banks. So it's a war for assets now. From one point, it's a war for the golden toilets. It's for the another point. So only ordinary people, also ordinary people of Ukraine, are totally forgotten from the Western side involved in this conflict, and that's sad, and that's tragedy for everyone.